Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. Happy day after Election Day. In today's video, we are going to be discussing the state of New Jersey, which has yet to make a call as to who the next governor of the state will be. Phil Murphy, if he is to win, will be the first Democrat to win re-election in 40 years versus the Republican who seems to be having a much better than expected performance when it comes down to this head-to-head race between these two candidates. Now, Phil Murphy currently leads Jack Ciattarelli by a very minuscule margin. The polling data had expected this race to be decided by single digits, but never to be just as close as it is today. There seem to be some very distinctive differences between these two candidates, but at the end of the day, it seems as if the New Jersey voters view them as about equal. The fact that this race is extremely close is a very horrible sign for the Democratic Party, and as you will expect from my analysis over the next week, we will be discussing why the results of this previous election won't be beneficial for the Democratic Party, and obvious as that is, we will talk about the future electoral implications of such results. So looking at the state of New Jersey, Phil Murphy has 49.94% of the vote, less than 50% of the vote. If he is to win this election, it is possible that he wins with less than a majority of the vote from New Jersey's constituents. Jack Ciattarelli getting 49.32% of the vote. Now, if you were on yesterday's live stream, you might remember that I was covering New Jersey very briefly. I never really thought it would be that competitive. And to see it this competitive was quite interesting, to say the least. I mean, we were looking at a result that had been updated periodically throughout my Virginia live stream. It was 16% in and the race was just as close. It was 30% in, the race was just as close. It was 50% in and the race was just as close. But Essex County had yet to report. And at that point in time, we were thinking, okay, Essex County is going to come in and Phil Murphy is going to end up winning with 10% of the vote over Jack Ciattarelli. Or at least that's what was expected by many political pundits and by the current expectations of the state of New Jersey. And looking at the electoral history, it made a little bit of sense. But then other counties started to report, including Essex County, and together the margin never really changed. And as of 89% reported, you see a margin that is down to less than a percentage point between the Democrat and a Republican. Now, if you don't understand fully the implications of why this is so significant, you have to understand that Joe Biden won this state back in 2020 by a margin of 16 percentage points. That's right. Joe Biden won this state by 15 points more than what the current Democratic incumbent governor is leading by across the state. And if you want to take a look at the 2017 governor election, the margin was nearly similar. In 2017, Phil Murphy was able to defeat the Republican lieutenant governor. He was not the incumbent at this time. He won by a margin of 13.5%, arguably an average of 14 points across the state. A rounded up margin of 14 points across the state if you do want to change the results to 13.5 to 14%. But at the end of the day, the point being that the results are dramatically different than what we are seeing today. And I think this is a sign that the tides are dramatically changing away from the Democratic Party, because this race was not even on the radar for the GOP. Jack Ciattarelli is probably one of the most extreme Republican candidates we have seen during the 2021 election cycle. And for Phil Murphy and Jack Ciattarelli to be neck and neck in a Biden plus 16 state tells you exactly what you need to know about the state of the nation and the current approval rating or disapproval rating of the Democratic Party across the nation. So Phil Murphy, Jack Ciattarelli, extremely close race. Let's talk about what might happen in the future. Dave Wasserman from Cook Political Report has already said that Phil Murphy is going to win this race, and I don't doubt that. Looking at the 11% of the vote outstanding that is yet to be reported, it seems as if most of that vote will be Democratic. But it won't be enough to give him an extremely solid victory. It looks like the highest point for Phil Murphy will be a 6-point margin down to a low point of maybe 1 or 2%. And at that point in time, it would be extremely embarrassing for the Democratic Party, no matter what this margin is. 1 to 6%, these are completely lackluster results, especially when this election wasn't even on the radar for the GOP. They never really thought that this was a winnable race, and seeing it this close actually has prompted them to add in a number of districts that are expected to be drawn for 2022 onto their NRCC list, mainly because if they can win in a state like Virginia, as they already have with Glenn Youngkin officially winning that governorship, more on that this evening, And they can come just as close in a state such as New Jersey, a Biden plus 16 state. These districts that were decided by just a few points for Biden or 10 points for Biden seem to be way more in reach than they otherwise would have if these results were not too good for the GOP. But you can see here that with many of these counties, we can actually do a comparison from the election results back in 2017. And you can see here that some of these counties actually are less blue than before. In fact, some of them have flipped over. For instance, Gloucester County, Atlantic County. These are counties that were won by 10 points, 13 points. Cumberland County was won by 14 points. In 2021, you're losing them by 10 points. You're losing them by 12 points. You're losing them by 11 points. These are counties that you carried just 4 years ago. And then when you take a look up, you can see significant losses in some of these areas. Burlington County is a 5-point margin. What was a 15-point margin? Camden County, what was a 37-point margin, is now decided by a margin of 22 points. These have significantly narrowed up for the primary reason that Democrats are no longer as popular as they once were, and that Joe Biden is ultimately weighing down the Democratic Party. And I'll show you what I mean about that. You know, it is not a coincidence that New Jersey, Virginia, and a number of other races across the nation ended up being more competitive than before. While Virginia, you might be able to pinpoint to the issue of education, which I certainly think is a valid one for the specific case in the governorship. But when you see it happen in New Jersey, when you see it happen in New York, when you see it happen in Minneapolis, when you see progressive policy and liberal policy shot down at ballot initiatives in Texas, or you see it happen in Minneapolis, or you see it happen in any other states that had these types of elections, in Seattle, right? A lot of these things have been pushbacks not only on the ideology of it, but primarily President Joe Biden. And the state of New Jersey, I think, is also a clear representation of that. Because again, this is a state that he won by 16 points nationwide. At this point in time on Election Day, Joe Biden was approved of by a margin of 7 points nationwide, or favored in terms of the favorability/unfavorability poll. But now he's down 8 points. That's roughly a 15-point swing. Well, can you see the swing in the 2021 race? That swing was 15 points to the right, and it's quite fascinating. Now, these results are not finalized. I think that Phil Murphy will do better than where he currently stands. In fact, upon the beginning of the recording of this video, it's not shown, but a minute before, it said updated 1 minute ago when I first started this, Jack Ciattarelli was actually leading Phil Murphy. So for the first time, according to the New York Times, Phil Murphy has taken a lead over Jack Ciattarelli. But looking at this swing, monumental to say the least, it clearly replicates what is happening on the national average. And in fact, it seems to be a little bit worse in terms of the approval rating in the state of New Jersey. This is from Monmouth University, a pollster that tends to go in New Jersey. I mean, they're from New Jersey, so they tend to stay within the state and within the surrounding area. They poll the Northeast, they poll different regions of the nation. But you can see here that in the Garden State, his approval rating dropped into negative territory. Just 43% of New Jersey constituents approved of his job as president of the United States, and 49% disapproved. His approval levels actually in August was 51%. In May, it was 55%. The margins here have significantly narrowed down, and thus the election swing has shown to be very significant as a result of it. So when you take a look at New Jersey moving forward, I think that the Democratic Party is going to realize that not only are they being jeopardized in nationalized races like the one in Virginia, in which Glenn Youngkin has very clearly won this race in a shock to many Democrats in the state, but it also extends to these states that were previously conceived as safe states for the Democratic Party. You know, you look at New Jersey and you say Biden won by 16 points. There's no way that a Republican wins. And yet a Republican nearly won last evening. When you take a look at a state like Virginia and you thought, you know, Biden won by 10 points, there's no way that the Republicans win there. And a Republican did win there, not only on the governorship level, but also on the lieutenant governorship level, also on the attorney general. And also, they won control of the House of Delegates, flipping it from a Democratic majority. I mean, just looking at what happens here in all of these races across the nation, significant improvements for the GOP have come forth. If you actually want to take a look at the 2021 shift from 2020 presidential race, take a look at this map. This should terrify the Democratic Party. Every single county, every single one shifted to the right relative to 2020. In the 2020 election, some counties actually shifted more right-leaning, even though Virginia went to Joe Biden as the largest margin of victory for a Democrat since 1944. And yet, in this election, it defies all expectations, with every single county shifting towards the right. And the same will be shown in the state of New Jersey. Because when you take a look at that matchup between 2017, or even if you compare it to 2020, which would arguably be an even worse shift for the Democratic Party, you see dramatic reductions in support. So with this race so close, another loser of this is not the Democratic Party primarily, even though they are actually, yes, primarily, but not only them, but also the polls in this race. Every single one of them said that Phil Murphy was going to win, and this wasn't an unpopular position. By the time we had reached the election, I had said that New Jersey will probably be decided by a likely margin. I could be wrong about that. It'll probably be lean, maybe even tilt, even considering how close it is today. The RCP average had Phil Murphy up 8 points statewide. Even the Trafalgar Group had a Republican pollster had Phil Murphy winning by 4 points statewide. Rutgers had it up 8 points for Murphy. Monmouth University, even with that Joe Biden being disapproved of, had him up 11 points statewide. The thing is, you could have seen this reduction in support from earlier on polling data. Rutgers at one point had it up 26 points and it narrowed down to a margin of 8. Monmouth University at one point had it up 16 and narrowed down to a margin of 11. Farley Dickinson had it up 15 points and then it reduced to 9. But no one could have perceived that the margin could have gone from what was back in May of 2021, a 26-point margin over Jack Ciattarelli, down to less than a point. And it shows here, according to Real Clear Politics, that it's a tie. Now, it isn't going to be a tie. We are going to know who the next governor is. And it looks like most of the networks here seem to have a clear idea of who it's going to be. But the fact is, it's so close for a reason. This has made the race extremely competitive and made 2022 look much grimmer for the Democratic Party. They are going to move beyond this point and see a dramatic reduction in support, not only in likely Biden states, but safe Biden states, which means that these likely Biden districts, these lean Biden districts, these tilt Biden districts are all 100% within reach. And possibly even, if New Jersey ends up being just as close as it is now, with just a little bit more money, with just a little bit more of initiative and campaign tactics and canvassing, that these safe districts could also be just as competitive. I made a video earlier on this year talking about how the GOP likely would not have any major victories in the 2021 election. And that ended up being wrong after last night's win in Virginia. I think Virginia probably will be their only victory, considering New Jersey doesn't look like it's going to end up going to the GOP at this point in time. But it's still a monumental one because Virginia was not at all expected. That's why at that time I was confident in saying that the GOP probably wouldn't be getting any major predictions. For a long period of time, I thought that Glenn Youngkin would be done for, that this race was going to be over. And as we saw on Election Day, it was not. I predicted that Youngkin would win. I did say that yesterday. I said that, my finalized prediction here is that Youngkin wins by half a percentage point. It looks like he's going to end up winning by under 2 points by the time all the ballots are cast. But all the ballots are counted with mail-in ballots still being arriving till Friday even. But looking at New Jersey itself, you are taking a look at a state that really was not even on the radar on my side, not even on the radar from many people's side. The Cook political report did not change their characterization of it, even though they changed theirs last minute to toss up in the Virginia race. Sabato's crystal ball did not change it, even though they changed their race last minute to Republican leaning in the Virginia governor's race. When you take a look at a lot of these networks and these companies that are able to outline and predict elections, many of them left New Jersey relatively untouched. And I think after what we saw last evening, it's not just the swing states. It's every single state that is directly responsive to President Joe Biden's approval rating. It is every single state that is directly holding Joe Biden accountable, no matter what type of race it is. It's these cities, such as New York City, or it's individual races across parts of New York, or individual races across the entire state of Pennsylvania, even the Supreme Court election that ultimately failed for the Democratic Party there, even though for a period of time it looked like they were going to end up winning with last-minute support from the Philadelphia area. So the point being that America is holding Joe Biden accountable. They are making it known that they will not allow him to continue under this unpopular phase and still elect Democrats. And that should horrify Democrats across the nation. Because as was done in 2010, Barack Obama was unpopular. He may have been popular starting out the same way Joe Biden was. He may have won re-election. But these individual elections, these midterms, these special elections, these off-year elections are super important for both parties. And at the end of the day, I think that the Democratic Party should be completely horrified about what the future results will bring them for 2022 and beyond. Because this last night's showing, especially with New Jersey being this competitive, is not a good sign at all. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2021 election analysis videos. I'm losing my voice here. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.